The December wind carved through my coat like a blade as I pushed through the service entrance of Villa Serafina. My fingers were numb, my tips from the morning shift already spent on Nana's prescription refill, and I had 4 more hours of invisible labor ahead of me. The kitchen heat hit me like absolution as I clocked in, tying my apron with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd learned that speed meant survival. Table 12 needs water, Marco barked without looking up, and the VIP section just sat. Don't embarrass us. The VIP section. I'd worked here 6 months and never been allowed past the velvet rope that separated the dining room from the private alcoves, where Milan's untouchables conducted business over wine that cost more than my rent. Tonight, apparently, we were short-staffed enough that my invisibility became convenient. I loaded my tray with sparkling water and San Pellegrino, smoothing my hair back with damp hands. The main dining room hummed with laughter and the clink of silverware against porcelain, but when I stepped through the rope, the air changed. It became heavier, watchful, like walking into a cathedral where every prayer had teeth. 3 tables. 2 were occupied by men in suits that fit too perfectly, speaking in low voices that didn't carry. The third table held only one person, a man who sat with his back to the room, his shoulders relaxed in a way that suggested he didn't need to watch the door because someone else was doing it for him. His dark hair was silver at the temples, his hand resting on the stem of a wine glass he hadn't yet lifted. I approached with the water, my training overriding my instinct to flee. "Good evening, sir. May I?" He turned his head slightly, not looking at me directly but acknowledging my presence with the smallest shift of attention. His profile was sharp, Roman, carved from the kind of bone structure that belonged in museums. And then I saw the boy. He sat across from the man, perhaps 9 or 10 years old, with the same dark hair and angular features. But where the man exuded controlled danger, the boy seemed folded in on himself, his hands moving in quick, frustrated gestures that went unanswered. He was signing. American Sign Language, I realized with a jolt. My college roommate had been deaf, and I'd picked up enough to navigate basic conversations during late-night study sessions when spoken words felt too heavy. The boy's hands asked a question I couldn't quite catch, and the man, his father surely, responded with a slight shake of his head, his attention already drifting back to the document beside his plate. The boy's face shuddered. He looked down at his untouched food, and I saw something I recognized from my own mirror on bad days, the specific loneliness of being in a room full of people who couldn't hear you. I set down the water and did something monumentally stupid. My hands moved before I could stop them. "Do you want dessert?" I signed, keeping my movements small, unobtrusive. "The tiramisu here is incredible." The boy's head snapped up. His eyes, dark, too old for his face, locked onto mine with an intensity that made me want to step back. His hands flew. "You know ASL." "A little," I signed back. "My friend taught me. I'm not fluent." "You're the first person who's tried." His fingers trembled slightly. "No one here knows it." The father's attention shifted like a blade turning. He looked at me fully for the first time, and I felt the impact of his gaze like a physical weight. His eyes were black in the candlelight, assessing, calculating, and I had the distinct impression I'd just stepped into a spotlight I couldn't afford. "You sign," he said. It wasn't a question. His voice was quiet, accented, northern Italian with something underneath, something older and harder. "A little," I repeated aloud, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to overstep. I just thought." "The tiramisu," he said, still watching me. "Bring 2 and sit down." I blinked. "Sir, I can't." "You can." He gestured to the empty chair beside his son with the kind of certainty that came from never being refused. "5 minutes. I'll clear it with your manager." The boy was already signing at me, his movements eager now. "What's your name? Do you know many signs? Can you teach me more English idioms? Father says I need to learn them for school." I glanced toward the main dining room, where Marco was watching with his mouth slightly open. The father lifted one hand in a minimal gesture, and a man in a dark suit appeared from nowhere, murmuring something to Marco that made him nod rapidly and disappear into the kitchen. "I don't understand," I said. "You will," the father replied. He pulled out the chair himself. "Sit, miss." "Lyra," I said, the lie automatic. "I never gave my real name at work. Lyra Castellano." His mouth curved slightly, not quite a smile. "Lyra, sit. My son has questions and I find myself curious about the woman who sees what others overlook." I sat, my heart hammering against my ribs, and the boy immediately began signing questions faster than I could answer. Behind us, I heard the soft click of the service entrance door closing, and I realized with a creeping certainty that I'd just crossed a line I couldn't uncross. The father watched us both, his wine glass finally rising to his lips, and in the candlelight, the gold ring on his fourth finger caught the light. It bore a seal I didn't recognize but instinctively understood, the kind of symbol that opened doors and closed coffins with equal efficiency. "Tell me, Lyra Castellano," he said quietly, his voice cutting through the boy's enthusiastic signing. "What brings a woman with your skills to carry water in Villa Serafina?" And I knew, with the cold certainty of someone who'd grown up in the shadows of men like him, that my answer would determine whether I walked out of this room the same person who'd walked in. I lasted 3 minutes before my phone vibrated in my apron pocket. Nana's ringtone. My stomach dropped. I started, already standing. The father's eyes flicked to my pocket. "Answer it." I stepped back from the table, my hands shaking as I pulled out the cracked phone. "Nana." Tesoro, her voice was thin, breathless. "Il daughter ha chiamato, devo andare in ospedal stasera, subito." My vision tunneled. The doctor called. "Hospital, tonight, now." I switched to rapid Italian without thinking, my voice dropping to the dialect of my mother's village in Calabria, the words tumbling over each other. "Cosa e grave successo, quanto e grave grave, sto arrivando. No resta al lavoro, il taxi. Nana, non più permetterti un taxi all'ospedale. Sto venendo, dammi 20 minuti." I was already untying my apron, calculating bus routes, tip money, whether I could beg Marco for an advance on wages he didn't have the authority to give. I ended the call and turned to find the father standing, the boy beside him with worry in his eyes that suggested he'd understood enough of my panic to be concerned. The father's expression hadn't changed, but something in his posture had sharpened, oriented toward me like a weapon finding its target. "Your grandmother," he said. "I have to go, I'm sorry. Please tell Marco." The words stuck in my throat. Marco would fire me. I'd walked off the floor during VIP service. I'd lost the job I couldn't afford to lose for the grandmother I couldn't afford to save. The father pulled out his phone, typed something with his thumbs and pocketed it again. "Where is she?" "Viator di Liano, but I can." "My driver will take you. He'll wait and bring you both to Clinica Sant'Ambrogio. They're expecting you." I stared at him. "I can't pay for Sant'Ambrogio. I can barely pay for the public hospital." "You're not paying." He said it like the concept of payment was irrelevant, a detail handled by people he'd never meet. "My son's physician is excellent. He'll see your grandmother tonight." "Why would you?" I couldn't finish the question. "Why would you help me? Why would a man who wore power like cologne and had security shadows trailing him through an upscale restaurant offer to help a waitress he'd met 5 minutes ago?" The boy signed something quickly, and his father glanced down at him, then back at me. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made my spine straighten involuntarily. "Because you saw my son when everyone else in this city looks through him like glass. Because you speak a language of attention that most people never learn." He gestured toward the door, where a man in a dark suit had appeared. "Leonardo will drive you. Give him the address. I'll handle your manager." "I don't even know your name," I said, the absurdity of it hitting me. His smile was brief, sharp, and didn't reach his eyes. Dante Ravenna, and you're not Lyra Castellano. Your accent when you spoke to your grandmother was pure Espramont, and Castellano is a Sicilian name you chose because it sounds close enough to real to pass casual inspection. But we'll discuss your actual identity later. Go. Your grandmother is waiting. He knew, of course he knew. Men like him always knew. Leonardo was already holding the door open, his face professionally blank. The boy signed goodbye, his expression hopeful in a way that made my chest ache. And Dante Ravenna stood watching me with the patience of someone who'd learned to wait for people to make the only choice available. I went. The car was black, German, and smelled like leather that cost more than my life. Leonardo drove with the aggressive competence of someone who'd learned to navigate Milan streets at speed without attracting attention. I gave him Nana's address and watched the city blur past through tinted windows, my hands twisted together in my lap. My phone buzzed, unknown number. I answered without thinking. Lyra. Dante Ravenna's voice was somehow more intimate through the phone, like he was speaking directly into my ear. What's your grandmother's name? Rosa Mancini. Thank you, Dr. Bertelli is expecting you both. He'll run a full workup tonight. Whatever she needs, she'll have. Mr. Ravenna, I can't. You can and you will. We'll discuss terms later. Terms, my breath caught. What kind of terms? The kind where everyone benefits. A pause. Leonardo will bring you to Villa Serafina after your grandmother is settled. We have things to discuss. He ended the call before I could respond. I stared at my phone, at the unknown number that hadn't identified itself because men like Dante Ravenna didn't need to announce themselves. They simply were, and the world rearranged itself around them. Nana was waiting in the doorway when we arrived, her coat already on, her face gray with pain she'd never admit to. Leonardo was out of the car before I was, offering his arm with the kind of gentle formality that suggested he'd been trained to handle fragile things with deadly hands. Kai grave questo? Nana asked, eyeing him suspiciously. Un amico, I lied, a friend. Si I porto in ospedal. She let Leonardo help her into the car, and I saw the moment she registered the leather seats, the subtle scent of expensive cologne that lingered, the way Leonardo adjusted the climate control without being asked. Her eyes narrowed. Che cosa hai fatto, tesoro? What have you done? It was the question I'd been asking myself since I'd signed to a lonely boy in a restaurant full of blind people. Quello ci dovevo, I said quietly, what I had to. She studied me in the dim light of the car, her hand finding mine and squeezing with more strength than she should have had. Tu matter mi ha fatto la stessa promessa prima di spasser tuo padre. Stai attenta, Ilara. Gli uomini potenti raccolgono debiti, come altri raccolgono francobolli. Ilara, my real name spoken like a warning. Your mother made me the same promise before she married your father. Be careful. Powerful men collect debts like others collect stamps. But the car was already moving, carrying us toward a private clinic I'd only seen from the outside, toward a doctor who'd been summoned with a phone call, toward a debt I was already calculating in my head and knew I'd never be able to repay. Leonardo's phone chimed. He answered in monosyllables, then glanced at me in the rearview mirror. Mr. Ravenna says to tell you, no debt, only opportunity. Nana's hand tightened on mine. In the reflection of the window, I saw my own face, young, exhausted, caught between the grandmother I'd die for and the stranger who'd somehow seen exactly which lever to pull. The clinic rose ahead of us, all glass and light, and I felt the door closing behind me even as another one opened. Dr. Bertelli was younger than I expected, Swiss-trained according to the diplomas on his office wall, and efficient in the way of men who'd learned their bedside manner from textbooks rather than experience. He examined Nana while I sat in a waiting room that looked like a hotel lobby, all marble and abstract art in magazines I was too anxious to read. Leonardo stood by the window, not guarding me exactly, but present in a way that made it clear leaving wasn't an option I had. My phone buzzed twice, Marco, probably firing me via text, but I didn't look at it. An hour passed, then two. The clinic was quiet at this hour, just murmured voices and the soft chime of medical equipment, and I found myself studying Leonardo's profile, trying to understand what kind of loyalty made a man stand silent guard over a stranger's crisis. "How long have you worked for him?" I asked finally. Leonardo didn't turn from the window. "Long enough to know when someone's life is about to change." "That's not an answer." "Neither was yours when he asked what brought you to Villa Serafina." Now he did look at me, his expression unreadable. "He values honesty, Miss Mancini. Not immediately, perhaps, but eventually. Remember that." Before I could respond, Dr. Bertelli emerged, pulling off his gloves. His expression was professionally neutral, which I'd learned meant bad news delivered gently. "Your grandmother has severe congestive heart failure, complicated by fluid retention and arrhythmia. She needs immediate hospitalization and likely surgical intervention." He paused. "How much has she told you about her condition?" "Nothing. She doesn't tell me anything." "That tracks with her personality." A slight smile. "She informed me she's been managing her symptoms with stubbornness and prayer, which is medically inadvisable. I've admitted her for observation tonight. We'll run more tests tomorrow and develop a treatment plan." The floor tilted under me. "I can't afford." "Mr. Ravenna has handled the financial arrangements. Your only job is to make sure she follows medical advice, which I suspect will be the greater challenge." He wasn't wrong. Nana would fight every needle, every medication, every moment of care that took her away from her kitchen and her independence. I pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to push back the tears that would help nothing. "Can I see her?" "Briefly, she needs rest." Dr. Bertelli's voice softened slightly. "She's stronger than she looks. We caught it in time." Because of Dante Ravenna. Because a man I didn't know had made a phone call that had probably saved Nana's life. The weight of it settled on my shoulders like a coat I couldn't take off. Leonardo drove me to see her. She was already asleep, her face slack in a way that made her look ancient, mortal, terrifyingly fragile. I held her hand for 10 minutes, memorizing the familiar landscape of her knuckles and veins, and then Leonardo touched my shoulder gently. "Mr. Ravenna is waiting." The drive back to Villa Serafina took 20 minutes through empty streets. The restaurant had closed, but lights burned in the upper windows. Offices, I realized, or private rooms where the real business happened after the civilians went home. Leonardo led me through a side entrance, up a staircase with paintings I didn't look at, and into an office that smelled like leather and the ghost of expensive cigars. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, and Dante Ravenna stood silhouetted against them, still wearing his dinner jacket, a glass of something amber in his hand. "Sit," he said without turning. I sat in the chair facing his desk, my hands folded in my lap to keep them from shaking. He turned finally, studying me with the same assessing gaze from the restaurant, and I felt stripped down to component parts: useful skills, potential leverage, acceptable risk. "Your grandmother will receive the best care available," he said. "Dr. Bertelli is flying in a cardiac specialist from Zurich tomorrow. If surgery is required, it will happen here, not in whatever public hospital you were planning to take her to." "Why?" "Because you have something I need, and I prefer to establish value before discussing price." He set down his glass and moved to sit on the edge of his desk, closer now, his attention focused entirely on me. "You speak 4 languages fluently: Italian, English, and based on a phone call you made last month to your grandmother's pension office, German and French. You read people well enough to see what others miss. You're educated beyond your current employment, loyal to the point of self-destruction, and desperate enough to take risks that might otherwise give you pause. My mouth went dry. You've been watching me. Not watching, noticing there's a difference. He tilted his head slightly. My son is 8 years old. He lost his hearing in an accident 3 years ago, and I've been failing him ever since. I've hired tutors, therapists, specialists, all useless because none of them understood that he doesn't need to be fixed. He needs to be heard. You did in 5 minutes what I've spent 3 years trying to learn. I'm not a teacher. I barely know ASL. You know enough, and more importantly, you care enough. His voice dropped. I'm offering you a position. You'll work as my son's companion and translator. You'll help him navigate social situations, teach him what you know, learn what you don't. In return, I'll cover your grandmother's medical expenses in full, pay you 4 times what you make at Villa Serafina, and provide housing if you need it. It was too much, too generous. Men like Dante Ravenna didn't give gifts, they made investments. What's the catch? His smile was brief, approving. The catch is that my world is complicated. You'll see things you won't be able to discuss. You'll meet people who exist in the spaces between legal and necessary. And you'll be associated with me, which comes with its own risks. You're saying you're dangerous. I'm saying I'm practical. I run businesses that operate in gray areas. I have enemies who would use anyone close to me as leverage. But I also have resources to keep those people safe, and I protect what's mine. The last word hung in the air between us, weighted with implications I wasn't ready to examine. I need time to think, I said. You have until morning. He stood, pulled open a desk drawer, and removed an envelope. This is a plane ticket to Rome for tomorrow afternoon, a credit card in your name with no limit, and a key to an apartment near the clinic where your grandmother is staying. You can take it all and disappear. I won't stop you. Or you can come back tomorrow at 9 a.m. and start learning how to give my son the childhood I can't. I took the envelope with numb fingers. Inside was everything he'd promised, plus a folded piece of paper with an address written in precise handwriting. The apartment, he said. Leonardo will drive you. Your things from Via Tertulliano will be moved tomorrow if you decide to stay. You don't know where I live. His expression didn't change. I know everything I need to, Ilara Mancini. The question is whether you're brave enough to let me know more. My real name, spoken like a key turning in a lock. I stood on legs that felt distant, borrowed, and Leonardo appeared in the doorway as though he'd been summoned by thought alone. One more thing, Dante said as I reached the door. Your former manager at Villa Serafina has been informed you've taken a position with my household. He won't bother you. Neither will anyone else from your previous life unless you want them to. It should have felt like control, like cage bars wrapped in velvet. Instead, it felt like someone had finally seen me standing in the cold and decided I deserved to come inside. I didn't say thank you. I didn't say anything. I just left, following Leonardo back down the stairs, into the car, toward an apartment I hadn't chosen in a life I hadn't planned, carrying an envelope that weighed more than paper and plastic had any right to. In the car, Leonardo spoke once. He doesn't make offers he doesn't mean, and he doesn't fail to collect what's owed, but he's not cruel, Miss Mancini. Remember that too. The apartment was in Porta Nuova, all glass and modern furniture, and a view of the city that made my old studio look like a closet. My things, what few things I had, were already there, hung in a closet that could have held 10 times what I owned, my books stacked neatly on shelves designed for art. I sat on the edge of a bed that felt like sleeping on clouds and opened the folded paper from the envelope. In the same precise handwriting, "Welcome home, D." I didn't sleep that night. I stood at the window watching Milan glitter below me, thinking about Nana's warning, about the boy who'd looked at me like I'd offered him light, about Dante Ravenna's eyes assessing value with the precision of someone who'd learned that everything could be bought if you understood the currency. At 8:45 a.m., I got dressed in clothes from the closet that fit perfectly despite no one asking my size. And I took the card Leonardo had left on the kitchen counter with an address written on it. At 9:00 a.m., I walked through the door of Dante Ravenna's office and said, "I'll do it, but I have conditions." He looked up from his desk, his expression shifting into something that might have been satisfaction or might have been inevitability. "Tell me," he said. And I stepped fully into the beautiful trap, hopping I was wrong about the cage and right about the man. The conditions were simple. I would work with his son 6 hours a day, Monday through Friday. I would live in the apartment he'd provided but pay my own utilities. I would learn ASL properly through a tutor of my choosing, expenses covered but selection mine. I would visit Nana daily and have Sundays completely free. And I would be introduced as an employee, not whatever else his world might assume. Dante had listened without interruption, his fingers steepled under his chin, and when I finished, he'd simply nodded. "Agreed. With one addition, you'll attend certain business dinners as a translator. My associates are international, and your language skills will be useful." That wasn't part of the offer. It is now, but I'll pay you separately for those evenings, consultant rates, not employee wages. I should have negotiated further. Instead, I said yes, because Nana was 3 floors below us receiving care that would have bankrupted me, and because the boy, Matteo, I'd learned his name was Matteo, had left me a note in careful ASL handwriting. "Thank you for seeing me." The first week was disorienting. Matteo was brilliant, hungry for communication, and exhausting in the way of children who'd been starved of understanding. He taught me signs I didn't know, corrected my grammar with the patience of someone who'd grown used to being misunderstood, and asked questions about everything. Why people smiled when they were lying, why his father's business partners switched to English when they didn't want him to understand, why I'd chosen to work for his father when everyone knows what he is. I didn't have good answers for the last question, especially not when I started noticing the details. The men who came and went from Dante's office always carried briefcases that seemed too light for their size. The phone calls that happened in rapid Italian, code switching between dialects so fast I could barely follow. The way Leonardo and his counterparts moved, not like security, but like soldiers on leave. The silk-lined threat in every polite conversation Dante had with visiting businessmen who wore their wealth like weapons. I knew what he was. Everyone in Milan with working eyes knew what he was. Dante Ravenna ran logistics, shipping, transport, warehouses that moved goods across borders with efficiency that suggested either brilliance or bribery, probably both. His legitimate businesses were impressively profitable. His illegitimate ones were invisible but assumed. My mother would have told me to run. Nana, when I finally told her the truth, just sighed. "Gli uomini Ravenna sono stati patenti in questa città per 3 generazioni," she said from her hospital bed, her color better now, her eyes sharp. "Suo padre conosceva tuo nonno. Facevano affari insieme, molto tempo fa." His father knew your grandfather. They did business together. My heart stopped. "Che tipo di affari?" "Il tipo ci teneva la nostra famiglia al sicuro durante gli anni difficili." The kind that kept our family safe during the hard years. She patted my hand. "I Ravenna pagano I loro debiti, Ilara. Si dice questa e grave un'opportunità, probabilmente lo e grave. Ma non dimenticar mai che l'opportunità hanno sempre un costo." An opportunity with a cost. I was learning exactly how true that was. Matteo's tutoring sessions expanded naturally into afternoons where I stayed for dinner. Casual at first, just the 3 of us at a table too large for the intimacy. Matteo signing about his day, while Dante watched both of us with an attention that felt like being studied. Then Dante started asking me to translate documents, contracts in French, business correspondence in German, emails from associates in London and New York and Rome. I learned the language of his world through paperwork, Shipment meant cargo that maybe was and maybe wasn't what the manifests claimed. Consultation fee meant money laundering in a suit. Restructuring meant someone had been removed from the equation. I never asked. He never explained. We existed in a careful dance of plausible deniability. And then, 3 weeks in, he asked me to accompany him to dinner. Business dinner, he clarified, as though that made it something other than what it was. Associates from Marseille. They're considering a partnership and they speak only French and Italian. I need someone who can catch subtext I might miss. You speak perfect French. I speak transactional French. You speak native French. There's a difference. He wasn't wrong. I'd spent summers in Lyon with my mother's family before she died, and I could hear the music under French words that non-natives missed. When? Tomorrow night, wear something elegant. Leonardo will take you shopping this afternoon. I should have refused. Instead, I let Leonardo drive me to shops I'd only window shopped before, where saleswomen treated me like I belonged because Leonardo's presence suggested I did. I bought a dress in midnight blue that made me look older, expensive, like someone who ate at restaurants where menus had no prices. The dinner was at a palazzo in the old city private dining room. 6 men who looked at me with the calculating interest of people assessing vulnerability. Dante introduced me as his translator, his hand settling briefly at the small of my back, proprietary, protective, impossible to misread. The conversation started in Italian, slipped into French, and I caught the moment where subtext became text. The associate, Gerard, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, switched dialects mid-sentence, testing whether Dante would catch the insult buried in the compliment. He didn't, but I did. I leaned toward Dante, my lips near his ear, and translated in a murmur. He's implying the last shipment was compromised. He thinks you have a leak in your organization. Dante's expression didn't change, but his fingers found my wrist under the table, a brief pulse of acknowledgement. He pivoted the conversation in flawless French, addressing the concern without confirming he'd understood the insult, and I watched Gerard's face shift from smugness to respect. After, in the car, Dante was silent until Leonardo raised the privacy screen. You saved me from walking into a trap tonight. I translated, that's the job. You read Gerard better than I did, and I've known him for 10 years. He turned to face me fully. You're more valuable than I anticipated, Alara. That makes you both an asset and a liability. I don't understand. You will. He looked out the window at the city rushing past. People in my world notice competence. They'll notice you now. That means you need better security. I don't need security. Yes, he said quietly. You do. Because Gerard will remember you, and so will his associates, and some of them will wonder if you're my weakness before they understand you're my advantage. The word hung between us. Weakness. It should have felt like an insult. Instead, it felt like a confession he hadn't meant to make. When we arrived at my building, he walked me up. Not Leonardo, him. Stood at my door while I fumbled with the key, his presence filling the hallway with something that made my hands shake. Thank you, I said, for tonight. For the dress, the dinner, the... Ilara, he waited until I looked at him. You're not an employee anymore, you're something else. I'm not sure what yet, but when I figure it out, I'll tell you. He left before I could respond, and I stood in my apartment that smelled like his cologne from where he'd stood close in the palazzo, my wrist still warm where he'd touched it, thinking about weakness and advantage, and the way he'd said my name like he'd been practicing. I didn't sleep again that night. Instead, I signed to my reflection in the dark windows, teaching myself the words I thought I might need. Dangerous, beautiful mistake choice. In the morning, Matteo asked me to teach him how to say, "My father likes you" in English. I taught him, and he grinned like he'd won something. At lunch, Dante sent me a file, new security protocols, a phone number to call if you ever feel unsafe, a driver assigned to me for any evening activities. By dinner, I understood. He'd claimed me, subtly, publicly, in the language of his world where protection and possession were the same word. I should have been terrified. Instead, I sent him a text in Italian. I have conditions about this too. His response came immediately, tell me tomorrow. Tonight sleep, you're safe. And against all logic, all self-preservation, I believed him. I didn't tell him my conditions the next day. Instead, Nana had a setback, fluid around her heart, requiring an emergency procedure that had Dr. Bertelli paging the Zurich specialist at 3 a.m. I spent the night in the clinic's family waiting room, watching dawn break over Milan through windows that probably cost more than most people's cars, and trying not to calculate how much I owed Dante Ravenna in currency I couldn't name. He arrived at 6 a.m., still in yesterday's clothes, his hair disheveled in a way that made him look younger, more human. Matteo was with him, signing frantically before I could even stand. Is your grandmother okay? Father says the doctor is the best in Europe. I'm scared for you. I signed back automatically, my hands clumsy with exhaustion. She's strong like you. Dante set a paper bag on the table beside me, cornetti from a bakery that probably opened just for him, espresso that smelled like forgiveness. Eat. The doctor will update us soon. You didn't have to come. Yes, he said, sitting beside me. I did. Matteo insisted, and I've learned not to argue with him when he's right. We sat in silence, the three of us, eating pastry that dissolved on my tongue and tasted like comfort. Matteo leaned against my side, his small hand finding mine, and Dante watched us both with an expression I couldn't parse, something between possession and protection, and a third thing I didn't have a name for. Dr. Bertelli emerged an hour later, professional exhaustion around his eyes. The procedure was successful. We've stabilized her, but she needs rest. No stress, no excitement, and absolutely no arguing with medical staff. She's going to hate that, I said. She already does. She woke up long enough to inform me I'm troppo giovane per dire a una vecchia donna cosa fare. Too young to tell an old woman what to do. His smile was wry. She's remarkable, and stubborn enough to outlive us all out of spite. Relief hit me like a wave, and I felt my knees go weak. Dante's hand was suddenly there, steady at my elbow, and when I looked up, his expression had shifted into something raw, unguarded for just a moment before he shuttered it away. Go home, he said quietly. Sleep. Leonardo will stay here until she's awake. I've arranged for a private nurse, someone who speaks Calabrese and has experience with stubborn grandmothers. Dante. No arguments, not today. He glanced at Matteo, then back at me. You'll stay at Villa Serafina tonight. The apartment's too far from the clinic and you need to be close. I have a guest suite. Matteo will feel better knowing you're near. It wasn't a question. It wasn't even really a request. But when Matteo signed please, his face hopeful and worried in equal measure, I found myself nodding. Serafina was on the third floor, connected to the main house by a hallway lined with portraits of Ravenna men who all had Dante's eyes and Matteo's sharp features. The room itself was larger than my entire old apartment. King bed with linens that felt like water, a bathroom with heated floors, windows overlooking a private garden I hadn't known existed behind the restaurant's facade. Someone had already brought my things. Not just clothes, but my books, the photo of Nana and me from last Christmas, the cheap perfume I wore because it reminded me of my mother. Personal things that required attention to detail I found both comforting and unnerving. I showered, changed into pajamas that suddenly felt inadequate in a room this elegant, and tried to sleep. Failed. My mind kept circling back to Nana's gray face, Dr. Bertelli's careful optimism, the weight of Dante's hand at my elbow like an anchor in a storm I hadn't realized I was drowning in. A soft knock at the door. Ilara, Dante's voice quiet, may I come in? I should have said no. Instead, I opened the door to find him changed into casual clothes, dark trousers, a white shirt unbuttoned at the collar, barefoot in a way that made him seem almost vulnerable. He held 2 glasses and a bottle of something amber. "You're not sleeping," he said. "Neither are you." "I rarely do." He lifted the glasses. "Company helps, or at least it makes insomnia more interesting." I stepped back, letting him in, and he moved to the sitting area by the window, pouring 2 fingers of whiskey into each glass. The garden below was lit with subtle lights that made the winter landscaping look like something from a fairy tale. "Mateo's asleep," he said, handing me a glass. "Finally, he was worried about you. He's a good kid. You've raised him well." "I've failed him in most ways that matter." Dante sat in the chair across from me, his legs stretched out, exhaustion making him loose in a way I'd never seen. His mother left when he lost his hearing. Couldn't handle a child who required extra effort. I've been trying to make up for her absence ever since, but I don't know the language he needs. Not just ASL, the language of presence, of patience. You taught me that in 3 weeks. I didn't teach you anything. I just paid attention. Exactly. He sipped his whiskey, his eyes never leaving mine. You see what I miss. You hear what I can't. You're better for him than I am, and I don't know what to do with that realization except be grateful. The vulnerability in his voice made my chest tight. You're his father. That matters more than fluent signing. Does it? When I've spent 3 years making business decisions and security arrangements and building an empire I tell myself is for him, while he's been sitting in rooms full of people who can't understand his simplest request. He set down his glass. You walked into my life by accident, Alara. You offered him dessert in his own language. Do you know what that means to me? I'm starting to, I said quietly. No, he leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his attention focused on me with an intensity that made me feel like the only person in the world. You're not. Because if you understood, you'd know why I can't let you go. Why I'll pay for your grandmother's care, your education, anything you need, not to trap you, but because losing you would mean losing the best thing that's happened to my son in 3 years. That's not fair. You can't put that on me. I know, but I'm not a fair man, Ilara. I'm a practical one. And practically speaking, you've become necessary. Necessary. Not wanted, not desired, necessary. Like breathing, like infrastructure, like the logistics that kept his empire running. I have conditions, I said again, the words finally finding their way out. If I'm staying, really staying, I need boundaries. I need to know where the job ends and the rest of my life begins. I need autonomy, he finished. Respect. The knowledge that you're choosing this, not enduring it. He stood, moved to the window, his reflection ghosting over the garden view. I can give you that, but I need something in return. What? Honesty, complete honesty, about what you see, what you hear, what you fear. He turned back to me. People in my world lie reflexively. It's survival. But I need one person who tells me the truth even when it's dangerous. Especially then. Can you do that? I thought about Gerard's subtle insult. About the way Dante's associates watched me like I was a puzzle to solve. About Nana's warning that powerful men collect debts. What if the truth is that I'm terrified of you? I said. Not physically, but terrified of what you represent, what you can do, how easily you've rearranged my life with a phone call and a credit card. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes softened. Then you'd be smart. Fear keeps people careful, and I need you careful, but I hope over time that fear becomes something else. Trust, maybe. Partnership. You're not talking about Mateo anymore. No, he said quietly, I'm not. The admission hung between us, weighted with implications neither of us was ready to name. He crossed the room, stopped close enough that I could smell his cologne, cedar and something darker, expensive leather and controlled danger. Sleep, he said. Tomorrow visit your grandmother, then come back. Mateo wants to show you something he's been working on, and he paused, his hand lifting slightly before falling back to his side. I want you to meet someone, a business associate. She's difficult and I think you'll like her." "That's not ominous at all." His smile was brief, genuine. "Welcome to my world, Alara. Everything is ominous until it's not." He left, taking the bottle and his glass, and I sat alone in the expensive silence trying to understand how I'd gone from invisible waitress to necessary component in a machine I didn't fully understand. I finished my whiskey and finally slept, dreaming of garden lights and sign language, and a man who looked at me like I was both solution and problem. Nana was awake and argumentative by noon, which Dr. Bertelli assured me was an excellent sign. I sat beside her bed while she complained about the food, the nurses, the indignity of having tubes attached to her arm like she was some kind of science experiment. "Dante Ravenna mi ha salvato la vita," she said finally, switching to the dialect that meant the conversation was serious. "Lo sai vero. You know that, right? That Dante Ravenna saved your life." "Lo so. E tu lavori per lui adesso, vivi nella sua casa, mangi alla sua tavola. And now you work for him, live in his house, eat at his table." She studied me with eyes that had watched 3 generations grow and make their mistakes. "Tua mater mi avrebbe ucciso per aver lasciato entrare in questo mondo." Your mother would have killed me for letting you enter this world. "Non mi hai lasciato, ho scelto." You didn't let me, I chose. "Hai scelto per me." You chose for me. Her hand found mine, papery and warm. "Non ti biasimo tesoro, ti capisco, ma devi promettermi qualcosa." Promise me something. "Qualsiasi cosa," anything. "Non perder ti stessa cercando di salvar tutti gli altri. Gli uomini come Dante Ravenna consumano. Non è grave colpa loro, è grave la loro natura. Ma tu, Ilara, sei fatta di luz. Non lasciarci la spenga." Don't lose yourself trying to save everyone else. Men like Dante Ravenna consume. It's not their fault, it's their nature. But you, Ilara, are made of light. Don't let him extinguish it. I couldn't promise that. Not honestly. Because I was starting to suspect that Dante Ravenna wasn't trying to extinguish anything. He was trying to understand why I kept glowing in a world that should have taught me to dim. Leonardo picked me up at 2, drove me back to Villa Serafina through streets that were becoming familiar. Matteo met me at the door, practically vibrating with excitement, his hands flying. "I learned 50 new signs, and I made something for you. And Father says you're meeting Signora Castellani and she's very important and kind of scary." I laughed despite myself, following him up to the family quarters, a space I'd only glimpsed before, all warm wood and comfortable furniture and photos of Matteo at various ages. He dragged me to his room, where he'd created a poster board covered in ASL alphabet signs and English translations, each letter decorated with drawings. "For your office," he signed, "so you remember you're teaching me while I teach you." My throat closed. "Matteo, this is beautiful." "You're beautiful," he signed back, then blushed and corrected himself. "I mean your heart is beautiful. Father says I need to be more specific with compliments." "Your father is very wise. He likes you. He smiles different when you're here." Before I could figure out how to respond to that, Dante appeared in the doorway, already dressed for business. Charcoal suit, silver tie, the armor of a man who moved through worlds most people never saw. "Ready?" he asked. "Signora Castellani doesn't like to be kept waiting." "You still haven't told me who she is." "My mother's oldest friend. She runs the charitable foundation that funnels some of our less legitimate profits into legitimate community work. She's brilliant, ruthless, and has been looking for an assistant who speaks 4 languages and can't be intimidated." His expression was carefully neutral. "I told her about you. She wants to meet you." "Why?" "Because I value her opinion and she values competence." He straightened his cuffs, a gesture I was learning meant he was uncomfortable. "And because if you're going to be in my world, you need allies who aren't me." The foundation offices were in a converted palazzo near the Duomo, all vaulted ceilings and modern furniture that somehow worked. Signora Castellani was 70 if she was a day, dressed in Chanel and pearls, her white hair cut in a severe bob that made her look like a dangerous fairy godmother. She studied me for a full minute without speaking, then gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Sit. Tell me why you work for Dante Ravenna." No preamble, no small talk. I liked her immediately. His son needed someone who could see him. I happened to be in the right place at the right time. There's no such thing as coincidence in Dante's world, only opportunity recognized or missed. She poured espresso from a silver service, handed me a cup that probably cost more than my old monthly rent. I've known that boy since he was younger than his son. Watched him build an empire out of his father's ashes. He's brilliant, loyal to a fault, and utterly ruthless when protecting what he loves. Do you understand what that means? That I should be careful. That you should be honest. She sipped her espresso, her dark eyes missing nothing. He thinks you're clever. I think you're more than that. I think you're ethical, which is both valuable and dangerous. My foundation needs someone who can navigate international grants, translate documents from 5 languages, and attend charity events without being charmed by the very wealthy people who write checks to feel better about their exploitation. Interested. I blinked. I already work for Dante, yes, this would be additional. 20 hours a week, your own schedule, double what he pays you. She smiled, sharp and knowing. And before you ask, yes, he suggested it. He wants you to have options beyond him, which tells me everything I need to know about his intentions. I looked at Dante, who'd been standing by the window pretending not to listen. You're giving me an exit. I'm giving you a choice, he corrected. Stay because you want to, not because you need to. That's the only way this works. Signora Castellani laughed, a sound like cut crystal. See, ethical and dangerous. You'll fit perfectly. She stood, extended her hand. Start Monday. Dante will send over the details. Now go, I have a conference call with Geneva, and you two have whatever complicated dance you're doing that you think I don't notice. Outside in the car, I finally asked the question that had been building. Why? Why what? Why give me an exit? Why introduce me to someone who could help me build a life independent of you? Dante was quiet for a long moment, watching Milan slide past the tinted windows. Because my mother never had choices. Because Matteo's mother felt trapped and left. Because I don't want you to wake up 5 years from now and realize you've built a cage you can't escape. He turned to face me. I want you to stay, Alara, but only if you want to be here. That's not how your world works. You said it yourself, everything has a cost. Yes, but I'm trying to change the currency. His hand moved, hesitated, then settled over mine on the seat between us. Stay because you choose to. Stay because Matteo needs you, because the work matters, because... He stopped himself. Because what? Because I'm starting to need you too. And that terrifies me more than any business rival ever has. The honesty in his voice broke something open in my chest. I turned my hand over, lacing my fingers through his, and felt the calluses I hadn't expected on a man who wore suits worth more than cars. I'm scared, I admitted. Of this, of you, of how fast everything is changing. Good, fear means you're paying attention. His thumb traced patterns on my palm. But don't let it stop you from choosing what you actually want. What if I don't know what I want? Then we figure it out together. He lifted my hand, pressed his lips to my knuckles in a gesture that felt both old-world formal and devastatingly intimate. I'm a patient man when it matters. Leonardo cleared his throat from the driver's seat. Sir, we're here. I looked up to find we'd arrived back at Villa Serafina. Dante released my hand slowly, reluctantly, and I felt the loss of his warmth like a physical thing. Dinner in an hour, he said. Casual, just us and Matteo. And tomorrow I have a business trip to Geneva. 3 days, come with me. That's not a question. No, he agreed, his smile dangerous and warm in equal measure. It's not, but you'll still say yes. He was right. I was already nodding, already calculating what I'd need to pack, already thinking past my fear to the curiosity underneath. As I walked toward the house, Mateo appeared in the doorway, signing, "Did Father kiss you?" "He's been wanting to." I signed back, "Not yet, but maybe soon." His grin was pure triumph, and behind me I heard Dante's quiet laugh. I was falling into something I didn't have words for, with a man who was teaching me that danger and safety could wear the same face, and I wasn't sure if that made me brave or foolish. Possibly both. Geneva was a revelation, not the city itself, though the lake was beautiful and the Alps made me understand why people wrote poetry about geography, but the way Dante operated in it. Here, away from Milan's familiar territory, I saw him work. The meetings were technical, legal, carefully orchestrated dances of paperwork and plausible deniability. He introduced me as his language consultant, and I translated documents that turned his shipping company's gray market operations into legitimate international trade. I caught discrepancies in French contracts, spotted loopholes in German regulatory filings, and listened to conference calls where people said one thing in English and meant something entirely different in Italian. "You're good at this," Dante said on the second night, over dinner at a restaurant where the menu had no prices and the sommelier knew his preferences. "Too good. You should have been a lawyer. Law school requires money I didn't have." "You have it now." He said it casually, cutting into his steak. "If you want to go back to school, I'll pay for it. No strings. Consider it an investment in someone I'm learning I can't manage without." "You're offering to fund my education." "I'm offering to remove obstacles from your path. There's a difference." He looked up, his expression serious. "I benefit from your intelligence, Alara. It's only fair you benefit from my resources. Signora Castellani agrees. She mentioned it when I told her about your background." "You've been planning this." "I've been thinking strategically about how to keep you." His smile was slight, self-aware. "I warned you I'm not fair, but I try to be equitable." On the third day, everything changed. The morning meeting was with a banker I'd learned to recognize as the kind who laundered money through art purchases and charitable trusts. Professional, discreet, utterly amoral. The conversation was in German, technical banking language that I translated in real time, and I was focused on the numbers when I caught it. A reference to a shipment, Cologne to Naples, dates that matched documents I'd seen earlier, but the commodity listed didn't match, pharmaceuticals on one form, medical equipment on another. I kept my face neutral, continued translating, and made a note on my tablet. After the meeting in the car back to the hotel, I showed Dante the discrepancy. The shipment manifests don't match. Either there's an error, or someone's moving something they don't want tracked properly. His expression went cold, dangerous in a way I'd never seen directed at me. He made 3 phone calls in rapid Italian, his voice clipped, controlled fury underneath. Then he looked at me. "You just saved me from walking into a regulatory trap. Someone in my organization is sloppy or sabotaging. Either way, they're done." He took my hand, his grip almost painful. "Thank you. Genuinely, this could have destroyed years of work." "What happens to whoever made the error?" "That depends on whether it was incompetence or intention." His thumb traced my knuckles, the gesture at odds with the ice in his voice. "But nothing violent if that's what you're worried about. I'm not that kind of man anymore. I fire people and make sure they can't work in this industry again. Reputation death, not actual death." "Anymore." He was quiet for a moment. "My father built this organization with different methods. I've been trying to transition us toward legitimacy, but some old habits linger in the people he trained. I'm cleaning house, slowly, carefully. You're helping me do that." Back at the hotel, he pulled me into his suite instead of letting me go to mine. The space was all windows and luxury, Geneva spread below us like a promise. "I need to tell you something," he said, pouring us both wine, "and you're not going to like it." My stomach dropped. Okay. The man who made the error, or possibly the intentional discrepancy, is connected to a rival organization. They've been trying to undermine my operations for months, looking for leverage, weakness, anything they can exploit. He handed me a glass, his expression grim. "You caught something my own people missed. That makes you valuable, which makes you a target." What does that mean? It means increased security. It means you don't go anywhere alone. It means, he stopped himself, ran a hand through his hair in frustration. It means I'm putting you in danger by keeping you close, but I'll put you in more danger by pushing you away because they've already noticed you. So I'm trapped. No, you're protected. He moved closer, his hand settling at my waist, and I didn't pull away. There's a difference even if it doesn't feel like it. I won't let anyone hurt you, Alara. That's a promise I can keep. How? You can't control everything. No, but I control enough. His other hand came up, cupping my jaw, tilting my face up to his. I'm asking you to trust me. I know I haven't earned it yet, but I'm trying. I should have stepped back. Should have demanded he explain exactly what danger meant, what protection looked like, how deep into his world I'd actually fallen. Instead, I leaned into his touch, feeling the warmth of his palm against my skin, and asked the question that terrified me most. What am I to you, really? His eyes searched mine, dark and intent. You're the person who sees my son when everyone else looks away. You're the intelligence I didn't know I needed. You're the first person in a decade who's made me want something other than security and strategy. His thumb traced my lower lip and my breath caught. You're my weakness, Alara, and I'm trying very hard to make you my strength instead. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. He leaned down, his forehead touching mine, his breath warm against my mouth. Tell me to stop. I didn't. Instead, I closed the distance between us and kissed him, tasting wine and confession and something that felt dangerously like choice. His arms came around me, solid and careful, and I felt the restraint in how he held me, like I was something precious he was afraid to break. The kiss deepened, his hands sliding into my hair, and I forgot to be scared. Forgot everything except the way he touched me like I mattered, like I was worth the danger, like he'd been waiting for permission he wasn't sure he'd get. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his expression was raw. "Stay tonight," he said quietly. "Not for anything except sleep. I don't want you alone when I've just told you you're a target." I should have gone to my own room, should have maintained boundaries that were already blurring into nothing. Instead, I nodded, and he led me to the bedroom, gave me one of his shirts to sleep in, and held me in the darkness while Geneva glittered outside, and I tried to understand how I'd gone from anonymous to essential in a month. "I'm still scared," I whispered. "Good," he said against my hair. "That means you're smart, but I'll keep you safe anyway." I fell asleep in his arms, and for the first time in months, I didn't dream about falling. We returned to Milan to find Nana had been moved to a rehabilitation facility. Troppo lussuoso per essere real, she informed me when I visited. Too luxurious to be real. She was right. The place looked like a resort, with private rooms and gardens and a staff-to-patient ratio that suggested unlimited funding. Dante arranged it, I told her. Ovviamente, obviously. She patted the bed beside her and I sat holding her hand. Sei innamorata di lui. You're in love with him, not a question. Non lo so, I don't know. Sai lo sai, hai paura di dirlo. Yes, you do, you're afraid to say it. Her eyes were sharp, knowing. Suo nano era uguale. Face vicos terribili per procer la person ci amava. Ciu nano glide dove la vita tri volt. Alla fine la lelta divento amore, ci tu lo voglia o no. His grandfather was the same, did terrible things to protect the people he loved. Your grandfather owed him his life 3 times. Eventually, Loyalty becomes love, whether you want it to or not. Nana, cosa faceva il nano per la famiglia Ravenna. What did grandfather do for the Ravenna family? She was quiet for a long moment. Li aiutava a muover cos attraverso I confini quando I confini erano più pericolosi. Salvava vite tenendo la bocca chiusa quando altri parlavano. E quando mori, il padre di Dante sia sicuro ci fosse curata. Ci tua mater avis unastruzione. Ci tu nascisi in un ospital in vis ci in una baracca. He helped them move things across borders when borders were more dangerous. He saved lives by keeping his mouth shut when others talked. And when he died, Dante's father made sure I was cared for, that your mother had an education, that you were born in a hospital instead of a shack. The weight of legacy settled on my shoulders. Why didn't you tell me? Perché speravo ci non avresti mai dovuto saperlo. Ci potessi vivere una vita normale lontana da tutto questo. Because I hoped you'd never need to know, that you could live a normal life away from all of this. She squeezed my hand. Ma poi hai visto quel bambino e hai scelto la gentilezza in vis della sicurezza, propria come tuo nonno, propria come me, una volta. But then you saw that boy and chose kindness over safety, just like your grandfather, just like me once. I left the facility with more questions than answers and drove back to Villa Serafina to find it in controlled chaos. Security everywhere, Dante's office door closed, Leonardo stone-faced in the hallway. What happened? Regulatory audit announced for next week. Financial police. Someone tipped them off about irregularities in the shipping manifests. Leonardo's expression was grim. The discrepancy you caught in Geneva, it was bait. They wanted Mr. Ravenna to miss it, file incorrect documentation, then use it as justification to tear apart his entire operation. My blood ran cold, but I caught it. Exactly, you prevented their trap, so now they're escalating. He gestured toward the office. He's been on the phone with lawyers for 3 hours. It's going to get ugly. Inside the office, Dante looked like controlled violence. His jacket was off, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his hair disheveled from running his hands through it. He was speaking in rapid Italian to someone on speakerphone, his voice cold enough to frost glass. He looked up when I entered, held up one finger, then ended the call. How much did Leonardo tell you? Enough. This is because of what I found. This is because someone's been gunning for me for months and you prevented them from using their best ammunition. He crossed to me, his hands settling on my shoulders. Ilara, the next few weeks are going to be complicated. There'll be investigators, audits, probably surveillance. They'll look at everyone connected to me, including you. What do I need to do? Nothing. Your paperwork is clean. I made sure of it. You're legitimately employed, legitimately paid, everything above board. But they'll still question you, probably try to intimidate you, maybe offer you deals if you cooperate against me. His grip tightened slightly. I need to know you won't talk. Not because I'm threatening you, but because I'm asking. Everything you've seen, everything you've translated, it needs to stay confidential. You're asking me to lie to the police. I'm asking you to exercise your right to silence. There's a difference. His expression softened slightly. I'll give you a lawyer, the best in Milan. She'll walk you through everything, but I need to know you're with me on this. I thought about Nana's stories, about my grandfather's loyalty, about the facility where she was recovering because Dante had made a phone call, about Matteo signing, "I love you" yesterday morning, about the feel of Dante's arms around me in Geneva. I'm with you, I said, but I need something in return. Name it. Complete honesty, about what we're facing, what the risks are, what your actual business is. I met his eyes. No more half-truths. If I'm choosing this, I need to know what I'm choosing. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Sit down. This is going to take a while. What he told me over the next 3 hours would have sent a smarter woman running. The shipping company was legitimate but operated in gray areas. moving goods that weren't quite illegal but weren't quite legal either, using customs procedures that exploited loopholes, partnering with people who laundered money through his logistics network. He didn't kill people, didn't traffic humans, didn't touch drugs or weapons. But he facilitated others who did, indirectly, through the infrastructure he provided. "I've been transitioning us out of the worst of it," he said, his voice tired. "Cutting ties with the most problematic partners, restructuring operations toward legitimacy. But these things take time, and my rivals don't want me going clean because it would make me untouchable. They need me dirty to maintain their own leverage. So they're using the police as a weapon." Essentially, the audit is real, they found enough irregularities to justify it. But the timing, the scope, the pressure, that's orchestrated. They want me arrested or forced to sell my operations to them at a fraction of what they're worth. What happens if they succeed? I lose everything: the company, the resources, the protection I provide for people who depend on me. He looked at me directly. "Including you and your grandmother. If I go down, everyone connected to me becomes vulnerable." The calculation was brutal, clear. Stay and help him fight, or run and watch everything collapse anyway. "What do you need from me?" "Keep doing what you're doing. Translate, catch discrepancies, be present at business dinners where they're fishing for information, and trust that I'm building us a way out of this that doesn't end in disaster." "Us," I said quietly. "Us," he confirmed. "You're in this now, Ilara. I'm sorry for that, but I'm also grateful because I don't think I could navigate this without you." A knock at the door. Leonardo, his expression urgent. "Sir, we have a situation. The Milano Finanza wants to schedule interviews. Tomorrow. They're starting with Miss Mancini." Dante's expression went flat. "Dangerous." "Absolutely not. She gets a lawyer first, a briefing, time to prepare. They're saying if she doesn't cooperate immediately, they'll consider her part of the investigation rather than a witness." "Let them." He turned to me. "Don't say anything without your lawyer present. Nothing. I'll have Signora Castellani's niece. She's a criminal defense attorney, meet you tomorrow morning. But for tonight, I'm moving you and Matteo to a secure location." Why?" "Because when they can't pressure you, they'll try other methods. I'm not taking chances with your safety." "Dante, you're being paranoid." "I'm being careful, there's a difference." He was already on his phone, issuing orders in clipped Italian. "Leonardo, get the car. Call the safe house in Monza, tell them to prepare 2 rooms. And get Matteo. Don't tell him why, just say we're taking a short trip." The next hour was a blur of packing, of Matteo's confused questions that I couldn't answer, of driving through Milan's streets with an escort car I hadn't noticed before. The safe house was actually a villa in the hills outside the city, all gates and security cameras and guards who nodded at Leonardo like old colleagues. Inside, it was comfortable but functional, a place designed for safety, not luxury. Matteo was whisked away to a bedroom by a woman who signed fluently and promised hot chocolate, and Dante led me to a sitting room with windows that overlooked darkness. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "This isn't how I wanted this to go." "How did you want it to go?" "Slowly, with choice. With you deciding to be part of my life because you wanted to be, not because circumstances trapped you." He poured us both wine, his movements precise despite the tension in his shoulders. "But we don't always get what we want." "No," I agreed. "We get what we choose." He looked at me, something raw in his expression. "What are you choosing, Ilara?" I thought about Geneva, about Nana's stories, about Matteo's sign for family that included me now, about the way Dante touched me like I was breakable and precious and strong all at once. "I'm choosing to see this through, to help you if I can, to protect Matteo because he deserves protection." I paused. "And I'm choosing you, not because I have to, because I want to." He set down his wine, crossed to me, and pulled me into his arms with a force that stole my breath. His kiss was desperate, grateful, edged with something that felt like relief and fear tangled together. "You're going to regret this," he said against my mouth. "Probably," I agreed, "but not tonight." We stood like that for a long time, holding each other while the world outside tried to tear apart what we were building, and I understood finally what Nana meant about loyalty becoming love. I was in too deep to swim back to shore, so I dove deeper instead, and hoped Dante's promise to keep me safe was one he could actually keep. The interrogation was exactly as brutal as Dante had warned. Two officers from the Milano Finanza, a recorder and a lawyer, Giulia Castellani, who was Signora Castellani's niece and every bit as sharp as her aunt. She'd prepped me for 3 hours that morning, and her main instruction was simple: answer only what they directly ask, volunteer nothing, and remember that silence is not an admission of guilt. The questions came like surgical strikes, designed to make me defensive, uncertain, eager to please. How long had I known Dante Ravenna? What exactly did my job entail? Had I ever witnessed illegal activity? Had I translated documents that might pertain to money laundering, tax evasion, or organized crime? I answered with Giulia's careful phrasing. I was employed as a language consultant and companion for Mr. Ravenna's son. I translated business documents in French, German, and English. I had no expertise in finance or law, so I couldn't assess the legality of the transactions I translated. No, I